Columbia University is in the middle of a culture war with the Trump administration in America. What began as a dispute over pro-Palestinian protests on campus has now escalated into a high-stakes battle over academic freedom, federal overreach, and the future of higher education in the US. Hello and welcome to The Print. My name is Debdutta, and in this video, we discuss about the standoff between the US federal government and Columbia University. But before we begin, here are the key developments in the university over the past few weeks. Days after the Trump administration made a massive fund cut of $400 million to the university's medical center, it then made targeted arrests of Palestinian students Mahmoud Khalil and Leka Cordia. These arrests led to widespread protests across New York. Khalil even filed a lawsuit against the government for asking the disciplinary records of students. Now, in its latest move, the Trump government has asked the Columbia administration to completely give up its South Asian and Middle Eastern Studies department, ban the usage of masks in campus, among many other demands, or else face a fresh round of fund cuts. Amid all of this and debates over academic freedom and lack of dissent, what this has also done is that it has started a science versus humanity faculty war in America's top college. Trump and the Republicans have repeatedly attacked Columbia University since it became a focal point for pro-Palestinian protests in 2023 and 2024. The protests in response to the Israel-Hamas war peaked after a contentious congressional hearing in April 2024. Here's a timeline of what's happened since then. Now, in April 2024, Columbia's then president, Moshe Shafiq, authorized the police to arrest student protesters, which led to escalating tensions. This led to widespread arrests of protesters across the country, with over 3,000 protesters being detained between April and July. Riding on these arrests, Trump then campaigned on deporting foreign students who were involved in the protests, pledging to make college campuses safe and patriotic again. Soon after, upon re-election, he issued an executive order to remove foreigners with hostile attitudes and ordered the Justice Department of USA to target anti-Jewish racism in universities. Along with that, he also threatened to cut all federal funding for schools which were hosting illegal protests and warned of severe consequences for students involved. On 7th March this year came his first move. The Trump administration cancelled $400 million in federal grants to Columbia as a warning to other institutes. The one affected was Columbia's Irving Medical Center, which saw a fund cut of 232 projects being cancelled by the National Institute of Health in the USA. Reacting to this move, Nicholas B. Dawkes, who is the former chancellor of UC Berkeley and the president of the New York Academy of Sciences, wrote an article in The Atlantic last week where he wrote that American universities did not cause the onslaught that the second Trump administration is unleashing on them. But Trump's directives to restrict funding for science, especially the mandate to dramatically reduce National Institute of Health grants for scientific infrastructure, equipment, and lab support, all of which are essential components of university science, will cripple biomedical research across the country. Then came his other moves. A day later, Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil, who was a former master's student and the face of the pro-Palestine protests in Columbia, was arrested by the immigration department. Soon after, on the 13th of March, the Columbia administration received a letter from Trump's task force to combat anti-Semitism with further demands that Columbia should place the college president's office in direct control of disciplinary actions, develop a plan to hold student groups accountable, create new rules to prevent disruptions from protests, remove the current leadership of the Middle Eastern Department, and implement a complete overhaul of its admission process. But it does not end there. Khalil's arrest is part of a larger crackdown. On 14th of March, Palestinian student Leka Cordia was detained for overstaying her visa, a move that many viewed as politically motivated. In this, even Indians were not spared. Indian origin PhD student Ranjani Srinivasan had to self-deport amid concerns about Trump administration deporting her for allegedly participating in activities supporting Hamas. American commentator and former attorney David French wrote in a New York Times opinion piece days later that Columbia University is now the epicenter of the American culture war. Following up, the Trump administration has now issued a stern ultimatum to Columbia University, accusing the institution of failing to protect Jewish students from harassment and demanding the sweeping changes or risk further loss of federal funding. The letter states, "We expect your immediate compliance and demands a response from the university within a week as a condition for any kind of formal negotiation regarding the continuation of Columbia's financial relationship." On its part, Columbia did respond to the letter with a spokeswoman saying that the university was reviewing the letter while it remains committed to advancing the mission of supporting students and addressing all forms of discrimination and hatred on the campus. But activists and faculty members are skeptical. According to them, this is part of the Trump administration's broader strategy to use federal funding as leverage against universities that it sees as promoting woke progressivism. In 2021, then Senate candidate J.D. Vance had called for an aggressive attack on universities, while conservative activist Christopher Rufo had advocated using fund cuts to instill existential terror and enforce better discipline on campus. But beyond all of this lies a graver concern: the invoking of almost obsolete laws to criminalize dissent. The Trump administration's arrest of Khalil came on a rarely used provision of immigration law that gives broad authority over deportation. Immigration laws for deportation over political views is rare. Immigration laws are typically used for deportation in cases of direct support for terrorist organizations. Khalil's arrest was followed by large-scale protests, but they had limited impact. The Trump administration, on its part, framed its actions as a defense of Jewish students and an effort to combat anti-Semitism on college campuses. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon stated that the federal funding cuts were a response to what she described as a rising tide of anti-Semitism exacerbated by the ongoing conflict in Gaza. The administration has made it clear that it sees universities like Columbia as critical battlegrounds in the fight against what it views as the normalization of an anti-Israel sentiment. Now, Democratic lawmakers have accused Trump of criminalizing dissent, and some have even called his actions the greatest threat to free speech since the Red Scare. Critics even include Jewish groups who are arguing that Trump is using their concerns about anti-Semitism to mask a broader attack on universities, protest rights, and diversity programs. Professor Marianne Hirsch of the Columbia Jewish Faculty Group stated that the focus on anti-Semitism at Columbia is merely a cover for the Republican agenda to control speech and protest on campuses. Now, to make matters worse, there is a faculty war inside the campus as a result of these federal ultimatums. Professors are now internally divided over how to handle consequences of these protests. While on one hand, Jewish faculty from engineering, medicine, and business schools are pushing for stricter measures against protesters, such as banning masks, faculty in the humanities and political sciences have been more supportive of the protests. Medical and science faculty are also frustrated by the loss of funding, as they feel that they have been unfairly impacted by the controversy. Megan O'Rourke, editor of the Yale Review and a professor in the English department at Yale University, wrote in a New York Times opinion piece that there is a fear, or one like it, which is now settling into American institutions. The silence was instructive. Sharing an anecdote, she further wrote, and I quote, "In a faculty meeting I attended recently in a high-ceilinged room with carved wood and delicately painted windows, anxiety reverberated. We were warned of funding cuts, but the real wound ran deeper. The quiet, creeping sense that something larger, which is the very idea of the university as a place of free inquiry, was now slipping away." This is Debdutta for The Print. Keep watching for more such videos.